morning and to be able to share the fantastic results from the Early Childhood Public Opinion Poll. I want to start by thanking our poll partners, the First 5 Years Fund. They've been wonderful partners on this poll, and we so value their expertise and leadership. As many of you know by now, the poll results were released on Monday, and we've already gotten some great press here in North Carolina and nationally. We have also been giving one-on-one legislative briefings as well. Our national partners, First 5 Years Fund, have briefed Senator Hagan and Senator Burr's office already, and we have had the chance to meet with Speaker Tillis's office as well, among others. We'll be continuing to do targeted legislative outreach in the coming weeks. You know, the North Carolina Early Childhood Foundation launched a year ago with a mission to marshal North Carolina's great people, ideas, and achievements to build a foundation of opportunity and success for each child by 3rd grade. We're so grateful for the support that you all have given us as we work to create strong policies, programs, and investments for birth to 8 that improve 3rd grade outcomes. And I'm really excited that on our call today we have colleagues and partners from local, state, and national organizations, from early childhood, K-12, and higher education, from foundations, policy organizations, government, and the legislature. Our work at the foundation centers around building public will, accelerating what works, and igniting action at the state and community level. Our approach is grounded in our working theory of how policy change actually happens. That change can happen when an issue gets defined differently, when new actors get involved, when there's greater media attention, and that there are public policy solutions that are seen as technically feasible and consistent with the values of policymakers and the public, and when there are great, knowledgeable, and respected advocates that take advantage of policy windows and relationships. So you can see that partnering with the First 5 Years Fund to gauge North Carolina voter support for early childhood was a natural fit. A little bit of background. This past spring, the First 5 Years Fund conducted a national poll on support for early childhood education. The results were released in July, and you can find them on the Grow America Stronger website. Through our collaboration, we were able to conduct a similar poll in North Carolina, with the opportunity to ask some questions specific to North Carolina's early education initiatives. In July, we brought together a group of more than 15 statewide early childhood education advocates, some of who are on the call today, to think together about what public opinion information would be most helpful to all of us as we work to advance North Carolina's early childhood system. The poll reflects the insights that were shared at that meeting. So with that, I'm going to turn it over now to Lori Weigel. Lori is a partner with the Republican polling firm Public Opinion Strategies. She's very knowledgeable about early childhood issues and the North Carolina landscape. Lori and Public Opinion Strategies conducted this poll in partnership with Jay Campbell at Hart Research, a Democratic consulting firm. Lori?
Thank you so much. I'm just going to walk through the PowerPoint that we have online right now, and hopefully everyone is able to view that. For those of you who are not able to see that or not near a computer right now, I'll try and be descriptive as possible in talking about the key findings that we're presenting today. So first of all, just a methodological note so that everyone is on the same page as to what we did. We spoke to 500 registered voters throughout North Carolina. That was proportional throughout the state, and it's demographically representative of the overall electorate. In order to ensure the representativeness of the sample that we spoke to, we conducted interviews on both landlines and cell phones, and that was completed August 17th through 19th. So for any of these overall numbers, there's a margin of error of just under 4.5%. Obviously, some of the subgroups, that will be a higher margin of error. And again, we talked about the bipartisan research team, both bringing our unique perspectives and collaborating on this survey together. So one of the things that we started the survey with was asking respondents to tell us if they had to make a choice about the priorities for our country right now, which one would they place as a greater priority? Holding the line on taxes and spending, which just under a third of the electorate selected, or making sure that there's sufficient funding for needs such as education. And as you can see here in North Carolina, voters are nearly twice as likely, just over twice as likely, to tell us that making sure there's sufficient funding for these needs is more important than sort of halting spending and fiscal restraint. That thematic really carries over into the next battery of questions that we saw as well, where voters are telling us that giving children a strong start in life is actually the most important of any of the issues, topping even jobs and economic growth as an important priority to them in thinking about what our nation is doing and the goals that we have. So making sure our children get a strong start in life so they'll perform better in schools and succeed in their careers was something that nearly half of the electorate selected as being extremely important. And respondents, when we collect those, the first two ratings, whether it was extremely or very important, 86% selected that. Obviously, when you add in those who said it was at least somewhat important, you have virtually everyone saying that that was a important priority and an important goal for our country right now. Note that that topped K through 12 education. As I mentioned, it topped economic growth and some other very high-profile issues. When we get much more granular and much more specific to the idea of making sure working parents can find quality, affordable child care and early learning for their young children, 7 in 10 still cite that as very important. The intensity of that is somewhat reduced, though. And so what that really tells us is that broader goal and thinking about it across that time horizon of what the implications of a strong start in life really are is something that collectively voters are placing as the top priority right now in the state. In fact, more North Carolina voters say this is extremely important than do American voters overall. And this is beyond the margin of error. We have 48% in North Carolina, as I just mentioned, rating this as an extremely important goal for the country. It's 42% nationally. So we've got a level of intensity that is even higher in this state than what we've seen nationally. We also know that voters are telling us that this is an area where they see a real need. Just about 2/3, 65%, tells us this is an area that we could do more in. And when they think about children here in North Carolina as they begin kindergarten and making sure they have the knowledge and skills they need to do their best in school, that's something we need to be doing more of. Only 3 in 10 say doing enough, and virtually no one thinks that we ought to be doing less in this arena. That's true across the partisan spectrum. We have over 4 in 5 Democrats, a solid majority of independents, and a bare majority of Republicans, indicating that this is an arena in which we should do more. And honestly, in talking to voters sometimes around these questions in more open-ended formats than the telephone survey, doing more implies government action. And so to have a majority of Republicans indicating that this is an arena where it's implied that we need government action is significant. And as you'll see, we get an even stronger response the more specific we become in terms of what actions we want to take. Clearly, North Carolinians are really on par with those nationally in terms of their response to this and in terms of wanting action on these issues. So we did check in about a national proposal of North Carolina voters. This is something we asked about in the national survey that was referenced earlier. And you can see the wording that is that we tested exactly is listed here. And one thing to note, we provided a price tag for this. We indicated that this would provide $10 billion per year for 10 years in grants to states to do these things and basically to provide low and moderate income 4-year-olds with voluntary access to high-quality preschool programs and make more early education and child care available. So really sort of a birth through 5 approach as well for this national proposal. And in doing so, we saw that North Carolinians are once again strongly supportive, 71% indicating overall support, 48%, nearly half, saying they strongly support this. And clearly that far eclipses those who are opposed to this, only just under 1/4 overall, only 14% indicating strong opposition. That intensity of support, again, is slightly higher among North Carolina voters than nationally. What we saw, just at margin of error there, 48% indicating strong support here in North Carolina. And again, we see that a majority of voters across every political affiliation are indicating support. And while there's a relationship to party, this sort of very specific broad approach on a national level where we're attaching a price tag of $10 billion per year is something that generates a majority support among North Carolina Republicans, 2/3 of independents, and obviously the overwhelming majority of Democrats. But what's even more significant is that we see some of those key swing groups, some of those voters that are being targeted right now today in North Carolina as being important to the outcome of statewide elections, are groups that have significant support for this proposal. 3/4 of independent women, 7 in 10 moderates. Overall, women being one of the most strongest in terms of their support for this proposal. Obviously, they are the what's generating a lot of attention and focus of the campaigns today, and are extraordinarily supportive of this specific national policy proposal. That support really just sort of increases slightly and intensifies slightly once we get that perspective that this is something that, while it might increase the deficit in the short term, should pay off in the long term by improving outcomes in other arenas so that we have to spend less down the road. I think that's already sort of implicit for many voters when they think about this issue. And so not surprisingly, we have almost 2/3 saying, hey, Congress, we want you to do this now. Only 3 in 10 saying perhaps this is something that could wait until later before they consider this proposal. Now, as was mentioned, we wanted to focus in on some very specific North Carolina issues as well and talk to voters and get a little more specific in terms of what's happening there in your state. And we referenced 2 of the programs that serve young children, NC Pre-K as well as Smart Start, gave them a sense of what those programs are, and then gave them a little bit of context. So less than 1/4 of North Carolina's 4-year-olds receive NC Pre-K, and Smart Start funding is inadequate right now to reach all the children that need it. And then asked them whether they would support or oppose expanding access to those programs so that more children in the state can participate in them. Given that context, we had 3/4 of state voters support expanding access to these programs given that context. And note the intensity of support, whereas it's fully 10 points higher than what we saw at the national level. So really strongly supportive of this particular program, especially given that context for the need that is out there. Notably, this is something where typically we do see a need, and voters recognize that not everyone is getting access to early education and quality child care, but here we're seeing really intense support for this proposal. That is echoed in another proposal that we tested, where we asked about investing in training and classroom resources so that our preschool and early elementary school teachers are able to teach each child in a way that addresses their individual needs. Virtually everyone, honestly, it's really hard to get an 88% in terms of support on a policy proposal these days. Everything seems to be so divisive. This is one that is clearly not. And when you have 2/3 of state voters indicating strong support, that's sort of rock star status. So this proposal is clearly something that voters are gravitating towards and say is important. And along those same lines, the idea of home visiting and parent education programs, we have 7 in 10 indicating support for that. And so that, again, very strong support. It just sort of pales in comparison to the rock star status we saw for the teacher training proposal. What's even more significant is that all 3 of these proposals are just hitting 50% or even higher across party lines. We have strong support, especially for teacher training among Republicans. And while there's a relationship to party, again, all of these, they've already been given that context of the prices that are associated with investing in these types of arenas, and we still see strong support across the partisan spectrum for any one of these particular issues. What was even more striking to me as a mom of 2 elementary age kids is that we are generating support, whether it's among parents or whether those don't have children in their home that they're responsible for caring for right now. And so This is not something where people are just saying, hey, what's in it for me? They are really seeing that broader context of how this impacts society and how it impacts other arenas, such as our economy. In fact, when we asked voters whether investing more in these types of programs would that better prepare children for success in school and life, would help North Carolina's economy, we had more than 4 in 5 voters tell us that yes, indeed, it would. In fact, 44% said it would help a great deal. Only 16% said it would only help a little or really not at all. So this is something that people are attaching greater societal implications for than just helping out young children today. So therefore, it's not surprising that voters are saying, hey, this is something where I'd be impressed if an elected official was supporting this type of initiative. In fact, a majority, 55%, say they'd be more likely to vote for that person, and it reaches our threshold of being effective. In terms of the campaigns that we look at, usually 30% is our barrier. We're at 32% that are saying they would be much more likely to vote for an elected official who supported these types of investments. Here's the important note. Almost no one says that they're going to hold this against someone. Fewer than 1 in 10 say they'd be less likely, and the level of intensity of that was minimal. So there is very little backlash in terms of people saying that this might be a problem here. In fact, it's generating strong support and would benefit candidates, especially among some super important subgroups like moderates and moms. Moms are really a group that we're targeting, and we talk to sort of lower income moms around the country when we do groups that some of you may have seen targeting so-called Walmart moms who are really under lots of pressure these days financially. That's exactly the type of people that are saying we need help in this arena, and that would be more likely to support a candidate who is supporting these early childhood education investments. So really to sum up, what we saw in this data was an even greater level of intensity and support than what we saw nationally. The voters here in the state of all political persuasions are saying, look, let's prepare children for school and life. This needs to be something that's a top priority, something where we want Congress to act now, and that they're supportive of when it comes to state-level investments as well. Why? First of all, they think there's a need. Second of all, they attach it to broader implications. 83% say it's going to help North Carolina's economy, and therefore it's a real plus for elected officials if they are supportive of investments in this arena. So thank you so much, and I will pass it back so that we can take some questions.
Thank you, Lori. We're now going to begin answering questions. As a reminder, you may submit questions through your questions pane in your attendee control panel. If you would prefer to ask a question verbally, please use the hand-raising feature in the left-hand side of your control panel. We will unmute your line, and you may ask your question. At this time, we actually have no questions, and we have no hands raised. We'll just give it a few seconds. All right, we have Larry. Hi, Larry. You're unmuted. You may ask your question.
Yeah, thanks so much. And this may have been said earlier, but where could we find links or materials about this? Some of these summaries, I've been taking notes over the presentation. Will that be available later in some form that we could share with folks who haven't been able to attend the webinar?
This is Tracy. The materials are all available on our website at buildthefoundation.org. If you click on right in the center, there's the release about the poll, and it will take you to a research summary. It will also share with you the presentation that you saw today and some other infographics and materials to assist with outreach.
Beautiful. Thanks.
All right, our next question is, can you speak to why there is strong support for Strong Start in Life versus less support for child care for working families?
Sure. I think part of that is that what we're seeing is a lot of angst and concern among voters, both nationally and at the state level, about, how our economy is changing, the types of jobs that are coming up, the technological changes that are happening. And voters really, Americans overall place great faith in education to make changes and to be able to give kids a stronger start in life. And so I think when we use that language, that we're tapping into some of the concerns and some of the feelings out there, and it's more of an emotional impact in terms of how people react to that, rather than thinking about it as sort of a discrete policy issue. Obviously there are different people in different situations of life. We talk to retirees down to recent college, recent graduates. So anyone from 18 to however old that we spoke to. So some of those might not be thinking about themselves in the exact situation as a working parent, but when they think about giving kids a strong start in life, they react to that in a somewhat different manner. And so that has real implications for how advocates in this arena might communicate about these issues.
All right, thank you, Lori. Oh, go ahead, Rich.
This is Rich Neiman. We also find that some people don't know that access is difficult. So you're asking them if they may not feel or may not know that working families need help accessing this. So that's another reason for a drop-off.
All right, thank you. Our next question is, what is the proposed price tag for PD expanding pre-K and Smart Start and home visit?
This is Susan. I'll be happy to take that. It's a really great question, and it's a question that we advocates get asked a lot and often don't have the answer to. And I think it's something that all of us need to think about, how we do make some assumptions about what the cost might look like to do the kind of expansion we think is necessary to get to scale on some of these programs. But there's a lot that, of course, whoever asked the question is well aware there's a lot that goes into those assumptions about how we cost something out, just in terms of eligibility for services, who needs them, who do we think should have access to them. So I don't have hard numbers for you today, but I do think that's work that we need to start thinking about doing.
All right, thank you, Susan. Next question. The speaker mentioned 3 priorities. To be clear, can you just reconfirm the 3 areas proposed for impact? I just looked at your website and didn't easily see the PowerPoint to review my own.
So I think in terms of what we tested, I'm hoping I'm interpreting the question right. We tested well, it might be easier to see it here, a teacher training proposal, expanding access, and then a home visitation proposal. I hope I'm interpreting the question correctly. Someone else can speak if I'm not.
Lori, this is Susan. I agree. I think what the person is asking about is, the issues that we asked about were expanding access to Smart Start and pre-K, making investments in teacher training and resources for both early childhood teachers and for K-3 teachers. And then we asked people about home visiting specifically.
All right, thank you. The attendee also asked about the presentation wasn't up on the website yet. Will that take a couple of days to get up there?
This is Tracy. The presentation is on the website.
I will try to make the link more visible, but if you go to buildthefoundation.org and you go to the center, there's a link right in the center to the news release. You just scroll down and the presentation is right there. I will also, I've also just tweeted the exact link as well.
All right, thank you, Tracy. Also back to Susan and Lori, the attendee said yes, that was her question. Our next question is there a perception that child care isn't educating or providing a benefit to children?
No, I don't think we're seeing that. I mean, I do think that people continue to differentiate in some ways child care versus quote-unquote preschool. And preschool is actually generally a positively received term, and it's something that, you know, depending on one's age, might be a more familiar term for some respondents. But, you know, I do think that within that they, you know, and that's a more difficult question, and perhaps, Rich, you want to chime in terms of what we've seen in some other places. But, you know, generally there is a sense that child care is beneficial, that having quality child care is the most beneficial, but certainly people want to make sure that this is quote-unquote voluntary, that this is something where parents have a choice and have decisions. And I think when we're talking about the availability of making and the ability for parents to make good decisions so that their children have access to quality, that continues to be something that people see clear benefits in.
Yeah, this is Rich. I would agree with that. The other thing to keep in mind is that child care and early learning are fluid for the public. In other words, child care is often a wraparound service around a set or set times of early learning. In different states, it's associated with different things. So without asking really deep questions about child care, in some places they consider it having an education function, and in some cases they don't. But I think what's important here is the support for making these things available. Although when you look at the chart based on other priorities, it's a lower priority, but it's still coming in at 66%. A combination of extremely and very important. So it's not like it's not important to people. It is important to people, but relative to the overall concept and the sort of holistic approach to giving children a strong start, it's the holistic approach that wins out.
All right, thank you both. The next question is, in North Carolina, policymakers haven't been very receptive to expanding SS and pre-K, although more support for pre-K. Any thoughts on how advocates can use this poll result to go from public opinion to political support?
Yeah, I think there's a few things. I think that they need to know that they're, generally elected officials don't do something if there's a downside to it. And so what this data is showing, I'm trying to fast forward again back to it, there we go, is that there's very little downside. There's far more upside, and that upside is really among a number of very important subgroups that lots of, and again, I'm on the Republican side of the aisle when my firm polls for candidates. We're polling for Republican candidates, and clearly these are groups that that those candidates need in order to be successful. There's not too many people out there that get elected if they've alienated moms, for example. And so when we see these types of enormous upside, very little downside among any subgroup, that is just a good indication that this is something that translates well in the public policy arena, from the public policy arena to the political arena. And so, one of my colleagues actually at my firm emailed me and said, hey, send me that national data again on early childhood. I've got a candidate who really needs to be in support of this. So, you know, I mean, when you have, you know, I wouldn't just share it with elected officials. I mean, sometimes they're staff. Sometimes it's the political consultants that need to see this type of data because they really get it and understand and are going to say, hey, now, this is something you really ought to get behind.
This is Rich. I would just add that one of the most important things you can do is use the materials up on the website to go out and talk to all the candidates who are running for office. You should use this and keep this as the nonpartisan issue and bipartisan issue that it is right now. The one we're seeing this nationally, and now we're seeing it in North Carolina. The one thing that everybody in all these parties seems to agree on is early childhood education, and the need to give kids a strong start, and the ways in which it's broken out in terms of the types of investments that people want. The best way to move this research into action is to actually go out and talk to people. And as much as you can do that with people on all sides of the aisle, not just people you feel comfortable speaking with, the better off you'll be in moving this issue over the top.
All right, thank you both. That was our last question, so I would like to thank everyone for your questions, and I'd like to turn it back over to Susan for a few closing remarks.
Thanks, everyone. And I want to thank Lori Weigel and Rich Neiman. That was Rich Neiman from Neiman Collaborative for sharing both the poll results and their thoughts on the answers to all of your questions. I think what my takeaway is every time I hear this briefing, I still get a little bit of a chill because I'm so excited about what a fantastic story these results tell. North Carolinians are united in their support for early learning. They want state and federal investments and action, and they view more favorably candidates that support these investments. We all know that, as the caller mentioned, public opinion isn't everything, but I want to close and end with this quote from President Abraham Lincoln. Public sentiment is everything. With public sentiment, nothing can fail. Without it, nothing can succeed. And so we know this is just the beginning of the work that we need to do in North Carolina, but it's a wonderful place to start, and we thank all of you for participating today and for continuing to do the great work that you're doing on behalf of young children and families across North Carolina. Thanks, everyone.